welcome to Comically Exposed, episode 9. I am Heather.
And I'm Gabbie.
And welcome again to our episode.
Done it. Did it. You're welcome to people. Feel welcome. So before this podcast, Heather and I have been talking about OCD and other mentals and stuff like that. I know you're all shocked. But this particular episode is going to be a little different from our normal episodes. We're going to talk about intentions, I guess, for next year.
Or now, because now it's next year.
Yeah. All right. How does time work again?
We're recording in 2023, but this is for 2024.
Yes. Correct. Yeah. So I do have some check-in stuff that I want to talk about from last episode.
Okay.
Does that sound good?
Yeah. Go for it.
Cool. Okay. So, and now that I said that, can't think of it. Okay. There are a couple of things on the horizon for me, which I'm going to say excited about, which is one, somebody from my aqua aerobics class said that her friend is starting a theater group and that I should contact them. So I have, and they're putting on a play and there's 2 female parts. So I'm looking at both of them today, and then I'm going to sign up for an audition, and then that'll happen. Unfortunately, I don't think I can make any of the rehearsals, but this is kind of goes to my pattern of rejecting things before they've even actually happened. Yes. So instead of rejecting it outright and avoiding, I'm going to do the actual audition and then, let the chips fall where they may. So
congratulations. Yeah, that's awesome.
Thank you. And then the other thing about it is the place where they're having the play and the auditions is a theater kind of close by in a suburban area. And I'm thinking, that might be great to rent out and put on my own night of, comedy stories about people, navigating the health system and the hilarity that comes from fighting with insurance companies and doctors and everything to get the adequate health care that you need. So, yeah.
Oh, that's perfect. Yeah, you mentioned wanting to do that. And it's cool that you found a venue. That's a great next step.
I know. So now I just got to figure out, how much it is and all that jazz. But I'm kind of excited about it because, with my last run-in with Oakland, I'm a little reticent to have a night of theater out there for parking reasons and others. So this is it may not be close to public transportation, but people with cars should be able to go there and find easy parking, and their cars will be safe and all that stuff. So, yeah, I think those are my 2 things. How about you? Any updates? Any comedy things you want to talk about?
Yeah, I think we recently talked about this, and I was opting to not talk about it, but I'm starting to think maybe I will talk about it, and then if I don't like it, then I'll just cut it out. But
nice.
So I recently completed a humor writing class, and
woohoo.
Yeah, and I wasn't feeling great about myself about it because even though it was a 4-week course, I missed 2 of the classes because 1, internet was down and I couldn't even go, and then 2, I was on the second class. I was battling a really bad bout of insomnia, and I basically passed out and I couldn't go. And I felt kind of like a shit, like I shouldn't have signed up. And I was being critical of myself, essentially. And I showed up to the final class with a piece that I've been editing on and off for the last few weeks. And I couldn't enjoy the fact that it actually performed better than I thought because editing it, even though I do like the editing process, for some odd reason, I was clouded in judgment the entire time I was editing the piece. And I couldn't hear praise for some odd reason in class. And I was actually having an OCD / social anxiety episode during class, which was not fun, and found myself dissociating and trying to ground myself, because it is when it happens, you don't really know it's happening until at least for me, it just sounds like you can't hear anybody. And then you're not there, you see things, but you're just like, I don't know what's happening. I don't, it's kind of like the Charlie Brown teacher voice or adult voices where people don't make sense in your mind, and you don't know what's happening. And so I try to ground myself. But then on top of that, I was being extremely self-critical because I felt like I was not giving enough notes. And so, of course, I was telling myself, you're a piece of shit and you're not giving enough notes. I know. And everybody else deserves notes because you got too many notes because you went second, and you shouldn't have gone second because you don't deserve it. And
well, as long as you're keeping score, that's what's important.
I know. And so I'm realizing right now it's totally irrational, but that's OCD for you. And so in the middle of the whole thing, I end up just saying things which ended up just sounding like facts instead of being helpful. And of course, I was criticizing myself. And then when we were done with class, I basically spent an hour or two trying to stop myself from doing compulsions to not feel bad. And basically it lasted for a couple days of just kind of feeling awful for some odd reason. And I realized that maybe nobody notices, that any of this is happening, or maybe they did. I mean, that's the other thing, it's like realizing that people can notice that things are happening. But inside, I was just feeling very like things were feeling a little bit, I don't know how to say it. It was like as if it's like not on solid ground. I don't know if that makes sense. It just feels like I'm just kind of like teetering on something and
liminal.
Yeah. And so it's just, doesn't feel great. And so I just wanted to say that. It's not an excuse to say it, but it's just like in the moment, I know I don't know what I'm saying in my head right now that I'm like saying out loud. I'm criticizing my criticism.
That part that I was wondering.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, though. I think that's so legit and speaks to our podcast in general, which is OCD is a sneaky little witch, and and the self-doubt and the self-criticism just seems to be her best friend, and, shows up, and then you judge yourself for judging yourself or being critical. And then you try and figure out, well, what was the right thing that I should have said in the moment, I guess, or whatever it is. But it just becomes like such a tornado of just feelings and thoughts, compulsions, urges, all of the above. And I agree with you, could be, I don't know that I necessarily disassociate, but it does start to pull you away from what is actually happening around you in the moment.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. So,
yeah. And that was the other judge too for myself, was I wasn't being present enough.
Right. Oh, so that's good that you were, as long as you were critical from all angles, then you know that you've done it right. As long as there is I think Maria Bamford talks about her family doing like whack-a-mole, but with joy. And so it's like you bring something pleasant to the group and they figure out how to whack it, all the joy out of it. And that's like what you're playing whack-a-mole of joy, but by yourself, with yourself.
Yeah. I'm really good at that. Yeah. It's a talent.
Yeah, exactly. I like to say that my strongest muscle is my self-criticism. And I also think it really, in talking about this podcast, maybe this is too meta, but it really walks a line of saying all the awful things that are being said to myself in my head, because that is my reality, right? I could present that like, hey, I'm doing great and everything's awesome and whatever. And then I feel like I'm not being truthful about my experience, right?
Yes.
Or I can say all the awful things that are being said to myself and put them out there. And then people are like, oh, you're really hard on yourself. And it's like, yeah, I know, and it's like, I don't mean to bum people out by it, but it's also kind of like my lived experience. And I do wonder, like, if I don't know about you, but like before I had the OCD diagnosis, like people would tell me I would say like, oh, I have all these really negative thoughts and I can't shake them or whatever. And then they would be like, oh, well, then just think positively.
Yeah. I was going to say that.
Yeah. It's like, if I had control over my thoughts, you think that I would be struggling right now? No, because I would have control over my thoughts. And it just, I know it wasn't people's intention, but it felt to me as though they think that I'm being lazy or contributing to my own downfall in some way, which I'm sure that I am on some part, but anyway.
Yeah, no, I feel the same way. I mean, I haven't recently expressed all the negative emotions in my head. It took going to this particular psychiatrist to really start to share thoughts, because I tend to keep things positive, because that's what I was always taught, that nobody wants to hear any of the other stuff. And that's the other thing that I just recently learned was, and I don't remember the term, but it's the term of changing the thought into a positive thought. Like it's like a swap, but it's almost like an avoidance issue, where if you swap the thought, it becomes, but it doesn't make it any better.
No, this is like, I had this really great therapist, and then she was going on sabbatical for 6 months. So I had to find a new one. And I went to somebody who was part of the CBT school, cognitive behavioral therapy school here in the Bay Area. And that was her thing. She was like, okay, so you're going to write down all the negative thoughts, which first of all, I was like, girl, there is not enough time in the day for me to be able to write down every single negative thought. Are you out of your mind? Like that's probably 50,000 thoughts, truly. Right. And then she was like, and then you're going to write like a response to each thought based on like reality and evidence showing why that thought is incorrect or whatever. And I was like, okay. And I tried it, but you know what it did? It brought up more thoughts of negativity. Yeah. And so then now that I have this dope therapist from No CD, he's like, oh yeah, that's just giving fuel to the fire, right? So he's like, if you engage with the negative thoughts and say like, this is why you're wrong, that's just giving them more attention, and it's just going to like empower the thoughts to come up more and stronger. And so instead, it's, there are plenty of other methods. You and I were talking about some of my favorites before the podcast, which is one, you just don't engage, you ground yourself, you pay attention to what's actually happening in front of you. And then my favorite, which was just sing it out loud. Whatever the negative thought or criticism that's coming in, you just sing out like, I'm the absolute worst and there's never been anybody worse than me and everybody hates me and I'm gonna die alone. Da, 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 do. The classics. And once you say it out loud, like there is something to it where it's like it gets it out of the body, it gets it out of the head, and it makes it a real statement that you can look at in the light and say like, okay. And I don't even have to engage with it anymore to be like, wait a minute, Stalin killed 10 million of his own people. So am I on par with Stalin as far as like terrible people? It's like, I don't even have to do that, because as soon as I see or say the thing out loud, it's like, oh, you know what? I can move on in my day.
Yeah. It's the well-meaning, well-intentioned people that
Yeah.
don't understand disordered thinking, at
Mm.
least in OCD.
Yeah.
And yeah, I've recently read something because, Instagram gives you, like, here's a person that you might follow.
Uh-huh.
And I saw one of her videos, and she basically made this claim with OCD. I think it was with OCD, because I was just so appalled by it, that 10% of it is true.
Yeah. Right. And it's like, okay, what does that do to benefit anybody?
I know,
That
because the first thing that I was taught is don't give it a number, just say maybe.
Yes, exactly.
Make it
That part.
ambiguous. Yeah.
Yes, I
Yeah.
know. And it's, yeah. Oh, Instagram. And from what I hear, TikTok is just full of very, let's just say, uninformed advice across the board, from everything
Yeah.
from geopolitics to self-help to mental health care to nutritional supplements,
Yeah. Yeah. Everything wants to be a cult
Yeah.
of
Mm-hmm.
something. Yeah. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to be flexible in the sense of thinking, because, there are other ways that are being explored with OCD as well, in terms of therapies. But I know right now the things that I've learned are the first time that I've actually had a better understanding of myself and not going through a lot of cycling. It's like, the difference between talk therapy and ERP
Uh-huh.
ACT, it's like 7 years of therapy, talk therapy, versus
Uh-huh.
a few years of ERP and ACT have been very different for me.
Yeah. Exponentially more helpful.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
I had a similar experience as well. Yeah, it's amazing, people who are like, well, therapy just isn't for me. I mean, listen, God bless. But also, I want to say, do you know how many different types of therapy there are out there?
Yes.
Like so many.
Yes.
And ones that are physical too. Oh, and this brings me to, you and I were talking about the practice, right?
Oh, yes. Yes.
Mm-hmm. And we don't have to talk about it if you don't want to, but I also was coming up against this, which is, one of the ways that I recognized my depression was real over the past couple of months was because my usual practice of every day waking up and doing a guided meditation and going to aqua aerobics 5-6 days a week and, doing these taking my insomnia medication and trying to go to sleep at a normal time. And, all of that stuff was not helping. Right. And
Yeah.
so then it was like, oh, crud. So then that's why I'm in TMS, which, by the way, if anybody cares, growing great. I think next week is my last week. And
Yay.
I know. And so, yeah, so far, so great. And I'm so thankful for it. But do you have anything you want to talk about as far as practice?
Yeah. Yeah. I was noticing, it's funny because it's like you forget to do things because you're like, I feel better. I don't need to do that.
Yes. Yes. 1,000%.
Yeah. So for a few months, I wasn't doing my practice as, rigorously, which is okay too, right? Because you don't want to judge yourself for not having time to do something, but it can kind of slip a little too much. A week goes by and a month goes by, and, then you're in November and wondering, why am I going through so many OCD loops and what's happening and why do things feel out of control? And then, it's December and you finally realize, oh, it's because I forgot to do the things that I've been practicing. And yeah, it's funny because I come back to it, but then I go, I'm okay. It's not that bad. And then, oh.
And it truly, and the thing is like, I swear OCD waits. You know what I mean? Because first of all, you're, we don't use the word cured because there's no cure of OCD. There is periods of recovery and, periods of struggle, I guess is how I'd put it. And not all of that is entirely in our control. The things that are in our control is, like you said, the practice, the doing exposures regularly, seeing a therapist, talking to people, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And so OCD is so sneaky because it's like you you've done a bunch of exposure therapy. You're doing so much better. Like OCD keeps trying to pop up and run her same plays. And you're like, no, I see you. I'm just going to keep moving on with my day. And you're like, oh, good for me. Look at me go. Right. And then you're like, you know what? What is the problem? I mean, beyond like not doing the practice, sometimes I'll just be like, it's just easier to do the compulsion, just like real quick. Do you know what I mean? And it just seems like such a silly compulsion where I'm like, oh, it just pops into my brain. Like if I walk on the left side, something good's going to happen to me today. So I'm going to walk on the left side of the sidewalk. And so I do it. And then the problem is that gives OCD oxygen, at least for me.
Yes.
And it's sneaky because then because you don't see your like, I don't know. For me, I don't see my base eroding if I haven't done exposure work for a couple of days or a month, or I haven't done my meditation, or I haven't done this or that. But then all of a sudden, it's like a Wile E. Coyote situation, and I'm run over the top of a cliff, and I am in midair going like, you know what? Something's different. Something's different. And then, you know, I look down and then it's like, no, there I go, crashing towards the ground. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. That's exactly how it is. Because at first you're like, oh yeah, I'm self-aware that I'm doing this little compulsion to make me feel less, you know, whatever the feeling is. And then after a while, it's kind of like you wake up and you're realizing that you Googled so many things.
Yes.
And you're like, what happened to the last hour and a half?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you're going, oh, was I here the whole time? Like what was I doing? And then for me, it's like I have 100 tabs open and going, oh, well, okay.
Yeah. And then you're in that place. And then something emotionally difficult comes up, like the holidays.
Yes.
And you're like, oh, there is, at least for me, there is no safety net under me currently that I build, you know, and now have neglected, or the safety net has a few holes. And that's exactly what happened to me. Is I spent a few months kind of, I guess, maybe avoiding doing my practices, and thought, hey, I'm a normal person. Look at me. I can do normal things. And then November hit, and then all the feelings came out because there was a lot of things fraught with difficult emotions, and it kind of took me over. So, yeah. So how are you doing now? You feel like have you started your practice again? Do you want to start it again? Do you want to talk about it on the podcast?
Yeah, I started meditating again, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
And I do see my therapist next week on Monday. So I am glad that I see him, because I think I'm going to talk to him about some of the things that I've been going through.
Good.
And yeah, it's about coming back to practices, and then maybe even using different ones to kind of, because, you know, that's what it is. It's about like the arsenal of
tools,
of tools. Yeah. Because you don't know which tool is going to be effective. You know, you could use the same tool over and over again, and it can work one time and it can not work the next time. And that's the part of uncertainty that we're trying to get our brains to get used to.
Yeah.
But the practice is like exercise for our brain.
Yes.
You know, when those hard moments come, they're a little easier to deal with.
1000%.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you recognized, you know, the hard time or a struggle or OCD coming back. And I'm glad that you're figuring out your tools and trying some stuff out. That's all we can do.
I'm trying it out.
Which, you know, smooth transition. The new year has just happened. And while you and I both are not, what was it, New Year resolution people, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I never really am. I'm always like, that seems like constricting. But I'm fine with, I mean, we talked about doing like goals or intentions or anything like that. How do you feel? You got any intentions you want to spit out to the people?
Yeah. Well, I did want to say doing this podcast has been very helpful in terms of exposure because I tend to like to keep to myself. Even though I want my work to be out there, sometimes it's just easier just to hide. And that's just where I live sometimes.
Yeah.
But this time I do want to expose myself in a different way by intentionally submitting things and allowing kind of rejection and failure to happen.
Yes.
More often.
I was just thinking the same thing for my intentions too, not to steal your thunder, but I was like, yeah. Because I think we've talked about our buddy Kelsey, who has a whole list of like putting, it's weird to call it a rejection list, but like, but she uses it as motivation, right?
Yes.
And I think that's so flippin' cool.
It is. And inspired by that, I think, I mean, it's a little harder when you have a lot of things that you want to do that aren't really submittable. So I was thinking that I would go after more things that were a little bit more submittable to give more deadlines for myself.
Nice.
And just kind of be motivated to finish something.
Yeah.
And submit to places that I've always wanted to submit to. So that's kind of that's where my head is at.
That's great. I mean, deadlines give structure, which, at least, my creativity really thrives with some structure. But then, you and I were talking about like rebelling also against structure. So it's a fun little balance. But, left to my own devices, I'll have a million sketch ideas even written down in my phone and no sketches are written. So, having a structure, having a place to submit to, or a group of accountability, or this podcast is very like helpful getting that stuff done.
Yeah, it is. So what about you, Gabbie?
Yeah, I'm kind of on the same thing, which is both with comedy and in life. I'd like to put myself out there more and be cool with rejection. So I don't know. I know we can only control ourselves, and I can't control my reaction to something, but I've heard and am hoping the more rejection I receive, the easier it is and the less personally I'll take it. So yeah, I don't know. No, I do know. I want to change a couple of things, like not even with comedy. I'm on this job search constantly because I'm tired of being in education. I'm very burnt out about it. And the hours of being a tutor are such that I can't do any open mics during the week because I don't get off of work until 9, sometimes 10 at night. And that's a real bummer. So yeah, I want to apply for more things, but not cold apply because that is not working for me. So I'm going to take people out to coffee for picking their brain purposes. I don't know what the nomenclature is, but yeah, that part. And also I really, along with this like night of healthcare stories, I would like to do more of that. I would like to do more of, instead of finding some place to apply to have them reject me or not reject me or whatever it is, I would really like to put on my own comedy night, And so if this theater works out, that's fantastic. And maybe it's cheap enough such that I can reach out to my buddies in the Bay Area and be like, great, we're putting on a comedy night. What do you want to do? Or a variety night, Yeah.
No, that sounds great. I like that too. Like, I'm going to steal that.
Great. I stole yours. Mutual stealing.
No, I mean, I think we've talked about this before, is setting our own and making our own stuff without it being for something. And I think that is a really good way of looking at it, because sometimes you just have to create your own stuff to kind of put it out there to let it exist and let it hang there.
Yeah. Yeah, man. Plus, I really miss performing in person. I'm sick and tired of not having people's attention.
You're like, look at me, look at me.
Exactly. Mom, watch this. Mom, look, I can do this dance. Is this cool? Look. But really, like, I miss improv. I miss all the things. So, so fuck you, San Francisco Sketch Fest. I'm going to put on my own. Suck it.
Gabbie's better San Francisco Sketch Fest.
That's the title. Uh-huh. I don't think there's any copyright infringement there. I think it's fine. Even though mine starts with San Francisco Sketch Fest and then in parentheses in like 3 times smaller font, Gabbie's own or something, and Gabbie's better version. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
I'll get my lawyers on it, but I'm sure it's going to be fine. Okay. Well, some other very cool things coming up this year. For the podcast, we're going to try and interview some people because we have a lot of friends, surprised, and we have a lot of friends who are in comedy or trying to get into comedy. And we have a lot of friends who also struggle with OCD. And in particular, flavors that you and I don't really have and have poo-pooed in the past. No, I'm just kidding. We just can't speak to those. So they're going to come on and they're going to defend, why contamination is the best OCD to have, why religious scrupulosity is the coolest one in the bucket, Yeah. The classic internal OCD warfare that's existed for centuries.
Yeah, because we need more.
Yes, 1,000%. Oh boy. Oh well, happy New Year to you, Heather, and happy New Year to all our listeners.
Yeah, happy New Year to you, Gabbie, and to all our listeners as well.
May your mentals be good. May your New Year be dope, and may all your wishes, I don't know, come
true.
Yeah.
Is that a copyright thing?
It might be, but there's a caveat: unless your wishes are mean, in which case, stop it.
Yeah, stop those wishes.
Go put down your wishes, write them down someplace, and give us 10 reasons why they should not come true. CBT, okay? Everybody do it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we did it.
Yeah, I think this is a good way to end the podcast. Right. I like alienating people.
That's right. So if you're still listening to this podcast, fuck you. You're a great human being, and we really appreciate you listening to us. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for listening, everyone.
Yeah. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Welcome to the end of the show. This is Gabbie Blachman.
And this is Heather Nye.
Thank you for listening to Comically Exposed. We are just a little show with 2 creators who edit and produce each episode. We appreciate all your support.
If you like what you heard, please follow us on Instagram at comicallyexp.podcast. That's comicallyexp.podcast.
Or subscribe to us on Spotify or wherever you listen to podcasts. New episodes drop every other Wednesday.
Also, special thanks to Track Club and Golden Finch for providing the music.
Thanks for listening, and hey, everybody, today is a great day to expose yourself. Okay, until next time, ta-da for ta-da!
Bye!
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.